In April 2007, a country vanished. Not physically, its people were still there. Its buildings were still standing. But in a matter of hours, every part of Estonia's digital infrastructure, banks, hospitals, newspapers, government websites, went completely dark. And what's even stranger is that the people behind this weren't soldiers from an enemy country. Neither did they need guns or tanks. Their weapons were the very tools Estonia relied on. Its own computer systems turned against it. What you are about to learn in this video is the story of the first ever full-scale digital arrest in modern history, when a country was being invaded, but through its Wi-Fi. And here's the weirdest part, that you will want to watch this video till the end. The authorities were never able to trace the person or group behind this chaos. This is the story of how a hacker, or maybe a group, brought a sovereign nation to its knees and disappeared into the shadows. But before we understand how this attack happened, we need to understand why it happened. And to understand that, we need to go back to a statue. In the center of Tallinn, Estonia's capital, stood a Soviet-era monument called the Bronze Soldier. It had been there for decades, honoring Red Army soldiers who fought in World War II. But to many Estonians, it wasn't a tribute. It was a reminder of Soviet occupation, because those same Red Army soldiers, after defeating the Nazis, didn't leave Estonia. Instead, the Soviet Union occupied the country for nearly 50 years, shutting down its independence, controlling its politics, and suppressing its culture. So while ethnic Russians in Estonia saw the statue as a symbol of liberation, most Estonians saw it as a symbol of their lost freedom. So in April 2007, the Estonian government decided to move it. Seems simple, right? You move a statue, you angry a few people, and things move on. But within hours of the government's decision, protests erupted and riots broke out. The Russian government condemned the move. But why so much rage over a statue? To understand that, you need to see it from Russia's perspective. The Bronze Soldier wasn't just a piece of metal. To Russia, it symbolized the Red Army's victory over Nazi Germany, a sacred story they've told for decades. Moving it felt like Estonia was erasing Soviet sacrifices from history and insulting the memory of fallen soldiers. But there was also a deeper reason: geopolitics. Estonia, once part of the USSR, had joined NATO and the EU. And by moving the statue, it was sending a subtle message. We are not under Moscow's shadow anymore. And the Kremlin couldn't let this happen, because it didn't want to lose influence in its former empire. Condemning the move and letting outrage build served two purposes: stoke nationalist anger at home to show Russia still defends its heroes, and pressurize Estonia internationally, reminding other ex-Soviet states what happens if they step too far away from Moscow's narrative. And while this chaos played out on the streets, something far more dangerous was brewing online. Estonian websites started crashing, one by one. First, the Prime Minister's office, then the Parliament. Soon, newspapers went offline, leaving citizens in the dark, unable to get trusted news. Banks froze, ATMs stopped working, people couldn't withdraw cash to buy groceries. Emergency hotlines went silent. Hospitals struggled to access patient records. Even the police lost access to their communication systems. To say it in a few words, Estonia was being digitally erased in real time. No warning, no demands. Just a brutal, relentless wave of cyber attacks. And it wasn't random. The attackers used something called a DDoS attack, distributed denial of service. Sounds technical, but here's what it means. Imagine a crowd of 1 million bots all trying to knock on your front door at the same time. Not to get in, just to block you from leaving. That's what they did to Estonia's entire internet, over and over and over again. And here's where things get chilling. Some of the servers traced back to IP addresses in Russia. And when asked, the Russian government denied everything. They said it was probably just angry patriotic hackers and rejected any official involvement. But think about that for a second. If a group of patriotic civilians can take down an entire country's digital infrastructure in a few days with no retaliation, what does that say about the world we live in? Because here's what made Estonia special. In 2007, it was the most digitally advanced country on Earth. Voting? Online. Taxes? Online. Healthcare? Online. Estonia had gone all in on the internet, even praised for it by being called Estonia. And then, almost overnight, that entire dream was turned against them. And here's what's even more disturbing. The attacks didn't stop after a few hours, or even a day. They lasted 3 whole weeks. That's 21 days of pure cyber warfare. No one could trust anything online. Banks froze. Emergency services couldn't communicate. The media couldn't publish. It was like going back in time. Only this time, they didn't know when or if they'd ever come back. And immediately, Estonia begged NATO for help. They said, this was a national security threat. It came from another country. Isn't this an act of war? But NATO didn't know how to respond. Because back then, cyber warfare wasn't even in the playbook. There were no rules, no consequences, no protocols. And this helplessness of NATO exposed something the entire world had missed. That gone are the days when warfare was limited only to borders. Instead, it has reached every computer, every phone, and every internet connection that the people of a country rely on. But just for a minute, let's go back to the attacker, or attackers, who actually did it. And that's the million-dollar question. No one knew who was behind the digital blackout. At first, it seemed like the work of angry individuals, patriotic hackers who were furious that Estonia had moved the bronze soldier. But as investigators dug deeper, the attacks started to look different. These attacks weren't random, but came in strategic waves. First, taking down banks and government websites, then targeting media and communication systems. This was a full-fledged military-style cyber warfare, the kind that takes planning, testing, and discipline to pull off. And then came the first real clue. Some of the servers traced back to Russia, even to IP addresses linked to pro-Kremlin forums where the attacks were openly cheered. Meanwhile, in Moscow, pro-government youth groups like Nashi were holding protests against Estonia. One of their leaders, Konstantin Goloskokov, later admitted to organizing parts of the attack, though he insisted he wasn't working for the Kremlin. A Russian parliament member even claimed that a staffer of his had done it on his own time. It was the perfect setup. The attacks looked Russian. They felt Russian. But officially, Russia denied everything. If anyone accused them, they could simply shrug and say, just some kids defending our honor online. And nearly 9 months later, in January 2008, the only person ever caught was a 19-year-old ethnic Russian living in Tallinn named Dmitry Galushkevich. He admitted to a single DDoS attack on a political party website. He was fined 17,500 kroons, around $1,000. Even Estonian officials doubted he could have orchestrated a 3-week national shutdown on his own. Which leaves us with this dark possibility. The real attackers were never caught. They left just enough evidence to terrify, and just enough doubt to walk away free. It was a ghost operation, and it worked. To quote it again, in 2007, a hacker, or maybe a few, showed the world just how easy it is to flip the off switch on the most progressive digital nation. And we still don't know who they were, or where they are now. But we do know one thing. They got away with it, and they're probably watching, waiting for the next time a statue gets moved. If you like this video, we have more amazing videos for you to watch. And don't forget to subscribe to Dark Protocol, where we bring you cybercrime stories that no one talks about.